Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Tom. Welcome back to another video. Welcome back to The Recessionist. I thought I would give you a little bit of a market update, kind of talk about the news, just kind of spitball and what's going on. If you guys are new here, my name is Tom. I run The Recessionist. Basically, at the end of November, I start predicting there's going to be a recession within 3 to 9 months. That is my call. I will stand by it. I kind of relisted and delisted some videos, trying to put them on my main channel, put them back here. And I kind of retrained my model and iterated it on everything like that. But the channel has been live since around the end of November. And if you go on my website, recessionistpro.com, it's around $10 a month. You can see if we go back to the updates here, it's been going all the way since around November 15th and November 30th was kind of when I iterated my own kind of override system into the actual indicators. So what my channel is different from other people is I have indicator tracking with like Fed indicators, but I also have like my intuition, gut feeling, and experience baked into the model. That includes things like political risks, things like cryptocurrency analysis and stuff like that. And that's where we started predicting in November 30th, 2025, that we're in the pre-recession phase. That's what the model has been in pretty much since then, with a slight uptick going up a little bit more, especially in the last weeks or so. As you can see here, the model was predicting around 52 in January 29th, and then it shot up like crazy, kind of went down a little bit, and then we have been going up ever since. One of the primary drivers of that move was the jobs revision report. It turned out entire last year's of jobs was completely a lie. So pretty much all that data that was saying, hey, the economy still seems to be resilient, was pretty much a lie. And that's kind of something I had been talking about and baked into my model already, but it needed to go up even more. So that's kind of why the model was not like at 30, because that would be healthy. The model was saying, hey, things are not looking good pre-recession. The data doesn't say this, but Tom thinks that there's something going on, and that is why the model was like in pre-recession already, and it's just kind of gone up and gotten more risky. So that's kind of where the standpoint of history is for the channel. If you guys are new here, and I'll try to kind of repeat that in every video, just maybe a little bit more succinctly. We also were telling you guys to probably get out of Bitcoin when it was around 90K, and now it's around 66K. So there's another recession we have, or prediction. Now, we can also be honest here, guys. Not everything comes true with what we predict. The main kind of case for this channel and prediction is the prediction for recession. That's our main case. And our main kind of holdings are just cash, some gold, and some treasury bonds. That's pretty much what we're advising. We're not financial advisors, but that's kind of what our analysis is pointing to. We're not like saying necessarily to invest in one thing or the other, but that is just the strategy that I'm looking at and going with. If we take a look at the S&P 500, you can see our analysis here. This is not necessarily a prediction. This was just a forecast, and it still could come true. As we can see here, this white line indicates what's actually happened. The green line indicates what would be a soft landing if Trump and his goons somehow managed to not fuck everything up, which is I'm extremely suspicious of. But the green line here, the dotted line, is actually what should have been a real soft landing to see more improvements. So we're somewhere for the S&P 500 between the recession, which is the yellow line, and the green line. So we're somewhere in the middle. Things are just kind of choppy for this S&P 500, and that is primarily due to all the huge AI companies. It's just as an aggregate, and a lot of other things like gold and some other things kind of going up before. Lots of times that happens before recession. It just kind of gets choppy for these big ETFs. But guys, if we look at stuff like NVIDIA, you can see here that it is closer to the soft landing than, the S&P 500. The S&P 500 forecast was more in the middle, but with something like NVIDIA, it's actually closer to the soft landing, which is, it's kind of been extremely volatile. But, if you look here, it still kind of has a long ways to go. But if we look at some other things like Apple and some other stocks, the forecast has been pretty much spot on. If you take a look at this, the yellow line is the forecast's model for what could happen to Apple in a recession. And if you look at it right here, it's almost followed it very closely, not in the straight line, but in the actual downward trend. So Apple is around 4.7% down over 11 weeks, and it is tracking pretty well to indicate we are heading towards a recession. Next up, we take a look at Amazon. Amazon is also extremely close to a recession. Right here, it's tracking very well and a little bit even more obviously seen up and then down. At first, it seemed like it was going to go towards this soft landing approach, but yeah, it's been tracking towards a recession. And finally, we could also look at Tesla. Also, same exact story, 10% down over 11 weeks since this model was created. And as you can see here, it's following exactly where the model was forecasting. We could also look at AMD, also pretty much not quite as close as a correlation, but very close to the recession line. If we look at some of the advisory kind of things that we talked about, what are some of the safer plays if we are heading into recession? Stuff like IEF, ZROS, these are actually tracking pretty closely as well. So if we looked at the bear case for the economy, or if we are in a really, really bad recession, that it could have been at somewhere, maybe $90, but we weren't really thinking of that. That's just kind of where the possibilities are looking if something really bad happened. The base case is this yellow line, and green line here is the bull case if things went really bad for this specific stock, but that's actually if things went well. So right now, IEF is also tracking closer to recession than the bull case. So that means that's actually done pretty well as well. So it's more likely that it's tracking towards a recession than the economy doing well. Finally, ZROS is one of the riskier 25-year Treasury Cooper bonds that you could buy as an ETF. Stuff like EDV is also very similar. If we take a look here, it is also tracking closer to a recession too. Obviously, not the same amount of growth you would like to see, but it is still tracking closer to a recession than the soft landing. So honestly, this forecast seems to be working pretty well. Almost every single one of these individually is tracking exactly how the model forecasted it. The only thing that it's not really exactly on, it's more split in the middle, would be the S&P 500, and that's only by an indicator of 0.8%. And that is probably why the model itself is primarily recommending cash, stuff like IEF. We are still around, and maybe a little bit gold, it would be around maybe 2.58% better than this S&P 500. As you can see kind of in these indicators here, doing a little bit better, beating out the S&P 500. But at the same time, stuff like this has way, way less risk. So for example, let's say we had a bull market and things like these treasury bonds, people don't really invest in these necessarily when things are going really well. They'd rather do riskier investments. So let's say the S&P 500, the market just shits the bag. It could go down like this, but if you look at something IEF, maybe it goes down just a little bit. So it's not really that much of a risk compared to something like even the S&P 500 or something like NVIDIA, as you could see, has a lot of risk there for downside. But these treasury bonds are pretty safe. This one a little bit less so than IEF, 7 to 10 year treasury bond ETF. So guys, that's kind of where the model stands right now. If you want to look in depth more on this and other tools, check out the website recessionistpro.com. It's only $10 a month. So it's a pretty good deal compared to most other finance YouTubers and all their kind of crap they're talking about. If we're talking about kind of the news lately, well, Trump is kind of freaking out because the Supreme Court said he can't just unilaterally put tariffs on countries whenever he wants. He kind of countered that by saying, we're going to enact this thing since 1975. It's never been used. We're going to put 10% global tariffs. But the thing is that a lot of news outlets aren't talking about is this has like a 150-day time period. And he is also extremely restricted on how he could just slap tariffs down on countries for random things. So it is going to cut Trump a little bit. How does that affect the economy? How does that affect the model? Well, honestly, guys, it didn't really actually move it today really at all. It's not really something that is that important for the model. The model is really tracking a lot of political risk. This isn't necessarily anything new. It's not like prices are going to go down. It's not really going to affect anything that much. And if we're talking about some of the other things lately that are way more important, I would say that people are talking about less, because not as exciting would be that job reports, as I mentioned, have been completely repealed. The GDP for December was 1.5% growth, and they expect it to be 4%. This entire thing today yesterday, no one's talking about it anymore because I was so worried about the tariff thing. But that is really, really, really bad. I actually think I was talking about that in some of my early videos, how I thought that spending was going to be bad in December. It just didn't seem like the holiday frenzy was there. But yeah, those are two things we're looking at today. But honestly, the model didn't even really seem to flinch. So if you guys are looking to get up to date on the model, I'm showing it right here. This is the number. But if you go on the website, you could always get the most up-to-date reading. We also have some analysis explaining exactly the changes and some of the indicators as well, and some of our ideas about potential investments and how to beat the market as of right now. Like I said, 2.90 with this current recommendation. I set this up maybe in January to have this kind of feature. The model's been going since around November, but we kind of implemented this feature into January, and since then, since this recommendation of our strategy started in November with predicting a recession. This is kind of our benchmark for what I was doing, and then I kind of implemented into the website later on, and that's kind of how it's doing against the overall S&P 500. But guys, if you look at the market tracker, also another tool we have on the website, very nicely laid out. You can even look and see some of the things that are doing really bad. For example, here we have 42% with Intuit, Oracle, Netflix, Adobe, Microsoft. A lot of these big tech companies are getting hammered. So I think my strategy is working pretty well. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of these forecasts, if you think they're cool, and how I did with making these forecasts. Honestly, some of them, it's pretty crazy. I would say out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I did 7 out of 8 very well. And this one is only off by a margin of around 0.8%. If it was just a little bit different, we would be tracking closer to a recession than the soft landing, and that would mean it is working. But who knows? It could always change next week. So that's something we're going to be looking at. Anyways, guys, stay tuned, and I'll see you again very soon.